everyone. My name is Cecilia Meme. Welcome to today's edition of the program Justice, a program where lawyers dissect legal topics in order to create awareness, educate, and enlighten the public. Joining me on today's program is Barrister Fortune Toma and Barrister Chineku Ape. Welcome, Barrister Toma. Welcome, Barrister.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Today we'll be discussing on the topic cyber stalking. Barrister Chineku, have you been bullied online before?
Okay, the only time
That's quite the question.
the only time I was bullied online was during my undergraduate days, when for the first time I lost an election. And when I lost that election, it was nearly impossible for me to lose then. So when I lost, it was a big thing for students.
Our student politician of the year.
And so they came after me. People were posting stuffs around the whole school. Some called me that is a cultist. A lot of things.
How did you feel like being bullied online?
Actually, then I was not yet a lawyer.
Okay.
I didn't even know about that. I didn't even know about that. I didn't know the provisions of the Cybercrime Prevention and Prohibition Act. I was just there. I didn't do anything about it, and it just happened.
Did you take any steps to petition the persons that were involved in such acts?
Like I said, it was something that happened spontaneously. I did not have the mind to do anything, because I didn't see it as a crime then. I didn't see it as something serious. So
Okay,
right now, if you try with me.
This takes me back to Barrister Toma. Barrister Toma, have you been bullied online before now?
You would have to be online to be bullied online. I'm not one with much of a social media presence, so
Well,
I've not been fortunate enough.
Lawyer.
No, I'm definitely not Gen Z. Whether I'm a Gen Z lawyer is a whole different thing, because there's a lot of meanings that we can claim from it.
Okay, so now what does cyber stalking entails?
Okay.
And what law actually provides for cyber stalking in Nigeria?
Okay. So before I answer, I want to ask Chineku, but were you a cultist?
I was not a cultist. Then we had this mantra.
I know you.
I was not. No, I'm not a cultist.
Just to clear the air,
I'm not a cultist.
No cultist.
I'm not a cultist.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think I have to take note of your specific diversion in your choice of words when you asked the question. Now, when you asked him before, he said, "Have you been bullied online?"
Yeah.
And then now you're asking me, "What is cyber stalking?" So there's cyberbullying, there's cyber stalking, and like I wanted to point that out first, because I think a majority of Nigerians are very. I want to what they know is cyberbullying.
Yeah.
Cyberbullying. But when we go to the courts, when we come to the legal framework, the regime for it, what the law recognizes is the crime of cyber stalking.
Okay.
Yes, and the Cybercrime Act is really popular now. There's a lot of cases, the Yabo Ojo cases, Very Dark Man, all those cases. So, it's now a thing, but the Cybercrimes Prevention and Prohibition Act 2015, that was amended, assented to by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in February of this year, is what criminalizes the crime of cyber stalking. So the question will now be, what is cyber stalking? The section is, that will be section 24. Yes, section 24. So we have several definitions, different categories of cyberbullying. It's essentially two-tiered. The first ambit speaks to the use of the intentional. That's a key ingredient. That's will. The intentional or knowingly sending messages by electronic means, to a person that is menacing or that is false, with the intention of just making the person lose his reputation or making the person feel bad or irking the person. So when you go about peddling information that is through electronic means, because that's another key ingredient. The intention, then the use of electronic means by way of computer systems. I think that's the way the Act describes it. So then you have like a second ambit of the crime, cyber stalking, which is much more serious. It attracts a much more serious consequences and penalties. Yes, yeah. And then this second this second category of cyber stalking also has two legs. And the first one will be when a person is still peddling information, whether it's directly, whether it's, sorry, I beg your pardon, whether it's on the media, but you're peddling information that is intended to disparage the person. But being more serious now, that is likely to put the person in reasonable apprehension of fear of grievous bodily harm, like of possible death even. So that's like the second definition, and I think that attracts penalty upon conviction of no less than, or at least, or at most, I think, 25 million naira. So the court's at discretion of the court, 25 million naira or an imprisonment for 10 years. So then the final one, which is the second leg of this second part of cyber stalking, subsection 2, speaks to when anyone threatens or puts you in apprehension of fear that harm is going to come to your property. Yeah, so that's interesting. Even your property.
So not just your person.
Yes, not just your person. You know, you disparage perhaps the service you deliver. Yes, and even the disease. Yes, so that's another ambit. Even your reputation. Your reputation, the reputation of your loved one who is a disease, or the reputation of a diseased person. The family members can come up and say, and bring an action, you know, in the courts of law on that provision, cyber stalking. So this is essentially what the framework is. So you call it cyberbullying, call it cyber stalking. You know, it's essentially one and the same thing. They are in the same category.
Yeah.
Yes, as a matter of fact. So.
Okay, this brings me to Barrister Akpe. What acts would amount to cyber stalking, cyber bullying, and what are the consequences of those actions?
As a former cyber bully, I was cyber bullied.
My learned friend, His Excellency Toma, has been able to at least give us a very clear understanding of acts that would amount to cyber stalking. So he has been able to explain that section 24 of the Cybercrime Prevention and Prohibition Act 2024, that was spot on these issues. You know, when you knowingly and intentionally spread information, and those information is to kind of reduce another person in the eyes of right-thinking people in the society, that's cyber stalking. When you input injury, because at that time I felt fear. At a point, I had to switch off my phone just to be calm at some point. So I felt, cyber stalking comes with criminal intimidation, comes with someone is just hitting on you and just wants to put something on you. And someone wants to just create unnecessary anxiety for another person. So these are a lot of things that could amount to cyber stalking. Now, in the terms of punishment, you know, when it relates to the issue of a disease, I think there's a number of years, and I think there's a number of years.
Maximum 5 years.
Yes, and 15 million.
Of course,
yes. But when it relates to the first ambit, when it comes to you just trying to menace someone or a character, that's when it will be the fine is going to be not more than 7 million, and the punishment is going to be not more than 3 years. So when we look at all of this, we see the consequences of what it has done to Nigerians. The issue is that the truth is that a lot of people that are victims of cyber stalking, they never talk about it.
True.
And that is the problem, and that's the essence. And that is the essence of this conversation, to bring them to speed, to say, this is what you should know about cybercrime, this is what you should not do, and all of that.
Yeah, but currently, I think there's a reawakening of people knowing their rights.
It happened because of the cases.
If you look at
the courts have,
if we look at it, a whole lot of popular cybercrime cases that happened, they happened this year and last year. This year and last year, the case of Very Dark Man and the Yabo Ojo, the case of I remember that there was there was a blogger that said some made some crazy statements that he could not back up about the Minister of Works, Raji Fashola, saying that he was part of the people that drafted the controversial bill against the presidential election tribunal petition or whatever.
Election tribunal.
He made that statement. He couldn't back it up, and what happened? And even went on to say that now the military is currently raiding the house of the distinguished minister. So when he made those statements, he could not back it up. The police had to come for him. He was arrested.
Yeah.
And I believe that law of cybercrime, the implications will be on him.
Yeah, there's also the case of these very popular musicians in our Nigerian space, Messi Shinro and Nathaniel.
Yeah, I know that one.
Some social media users alleged that
his child's father
child is not being fathered by the actual
father,
which actually created a very unhealthy situation.
And crazy stuff.
And the funny thing is, you don't know what this actually does to people. Somebody spent a whole lot of years to build his reputation.
And in one fell swoop, with the stroke of your keypad.
In some instances, some people can actually lose their job. Some people can actually lose their
and
some other very personal consequences. But these people that are out there to smear their image, they do not take into consideration that fact.
The emotional damages, the physical damages, the financial damages.
Just for the context, let's look at the case of the TikTok lady that went on the floor of her own to make some disparaging statements.
Is it that Blessing?
Blessing.
Yeah, okay. I think she's not just TikTok. On Instagram.
Yeah, she does. I think she has a lot of network around some social media. I heard she posted it on Gospel Mail and a lot of other social media platforms.
Yeah.
She did that, and somebody that knows the workings of the act said, "No, this is infringing to my personal rights, my rights and everything." She went to court. And when she went to court, the court, I believe it was a federal high court in Lagos, they went and they looked at the case. The judge convicted the lady, sentenced her, gave a sentence of 3 years or a fine of 150,000. And it was on 2 count charges: conspiracy to commit cyber stalking. That was section 27, and also on the part that the second count was now on the intention, knowing that this thing is false, and you went on to do it to kind of reduce this person's
reputation.
And that's where we talk about section 24, sub 1 and sub 2 and all of that. So we see these cases and we say that they are unacceptable as Nigerians, and we should not, at this time, knowing that there is an act, and you're keeping quiet without saying anything.
Okay, yeah, this brings me back to Barrister Tuma. Barrister Tuma, victims of cyber stalking, who should they report to? Should they just go to court? Or what should they do? What steps should they take if they are being bullied online?
Okay, so first of all, one thing Nigerians must know, and this may seem unrelated, but I'll draw the relationship. So first of all, one thing Nigerians should know is that most infringements of our rights, most actions of persons that more or less step into our own rights, they could be, brought to court, or they could be prosecuted, or carried on through different means, so under different legal regimes. For example, in the case of Iyabo Ojo that you just talked, she could have brought a case on purely defamation. Do you understand? That's a tortious liability.
Yeah.
Even she could have petitioned the Attorney General or the police to bring a case of criminal defamation if the elements of criminal defamation are in there. Do you understand? So these are options. She could also, as she did, prosecute that case under the Cybercrime Prevention and Prohibition Act. So I needed to lay that foundation to say, in response to your question, that first of all, the question is, what do they do? Who do they report to? Who do you report to when there's trouble in the land? The primary institution would be the police. When because they are the first institution that is focused on security of lives and properties for all Nigerian citizens.
Okay.
That's a given. So necessarily you can run to the police.
Okay, very.
Although they okay.
Let's go on a very short break.
Okay.
We'll be right back with you. Let's go on a short break.
Hello, have you or anyone you know suffered violation or oppression, regardless of cultures, identities, or backgrounds? Leadership Hub, Justice and Economic Advancement is here for you. An organization created with an amplified voice to fight for you and with you. At LJE Nigeria, you will not only be heard, but also provided with legal support. Together, we can create a country where every individual can live without fear of violation or oppression. I am Aisha Shetima, an LJE member. You too can become a member today or report any violation by visiting our website, ljenigeria.org. You can also follow us on all social media platforms for more information and updates. Remember, together, we are stronger.
Welcome back. Barrister Tuma, before we went on that very short break, we were discussing on who should victims of cyberbullying make their reports to. And you actually mentioned the police. Can you throw more light on that?
Okay, thank you very much. As I was saying, so of course, as a crime, the police is the first point of call for every average citizen. But as far as what the Act says, in terms of the administration of the entire cybercrime ecosystem, the law says, I think it's section 41 or thereabouts. 41, yes, it says that the Office of the National Security Advisor should coordinate with other security agencies to address the issue of cyber crimes generally. So we're talking cyber stalking, cyber squatting, cyber bullying, whatever the terms are. So that's what the law says. But in terms of who can the average Nigerian go to, obviously we can't go to the Office of the National Security Advisor. Yeah. So your first point of go will be to the Nigerian Police Force, and then the Nigerian Police Force will help you, will take up the issue, and then it will even help the alleged cyber stalker to, let's say, maintain status quo, to press pause. Maybe that apprehension that, okay, there may be legal consequences, or I can't just do this and get away with it, or and then so that's essentially it. But there's another option. I would like to say that it is also possible, although I've not done my research, so I don't know if there's been any clear example, but definitely it is possible for a Nigerian citizen to bring a public petition against any cyber stalker before the National Assembly, either in the Senate, the upper chambers, or in the House of Reps.
Okay.
This is a fact. So the process is simple. The Committee on Public Petition in the House of Reps has a website online. Just Google it. And you can go there, get a lawyer to put together a petition for you.
Thank you.
Of course, you need lawyers across, even if you are going to the police. If the police will take you to court, take the person to court, lawyers will be involved. So, of course, lawyers are
just
important.
To chip in, if you are a Nigerian that is actually scared of going to the police directly, you can actually also get through to the police via your lawyers.
Yes, so that's a fact.
Because your lawyers directly will not want, some of them will not want to go to the police. They can just maintain an action in tort.
Yes, that's okay.
So for defamation and cyber stalking.
Yeah.
It brings me back to the point I made earlier. When I said one offense, one crime can be brought or prosecuted in court through different routes, through different regimes. So the one you just mentioned now is pursuing an action in tort. Your lawyer would not need to go to the police. So I also mentioned bringing a petition through a member. If you don't know your member, your rep member, you can meet any rep member. If you don't know, and don't think you have to come to Abuja. From the comfort of your home, true. If you cannot locate the constituency office of the member or senator within closest to you, you can go online and file your petition through your lawyer, of course, directly on the House Committee on Public Petitions. It will be brought up by the chairman in the floor of the House, and they will invite all parties.
Even just to add to it, let's not even be going that far to the National Assembly. Our business here at Leadership Hub, we can also help you to get your rights. So don't go too far to look for a senator somewhere. You can bring it directly to us via our report a violence email, and we'll take it up.
That's on the website, on the LJ's website.
This issue of cyber stalking, cyber bullying, is it one that can just be tried in any court? Because over time, you see some people, when they have some of these issues, they just run to the magistrate court. Some of them go to the high court, not knowing the court that has jurisdiction to try such issues. Do you have any idea which court should actually handle cyber crimes or issues emanating from online bullying?
I think when it comes to
Federal High Court.
When it comes to crimes, it's an offense and it's against the state.
Okay.
And I think considering jurisdictional issues here, to the proper court to institute such an action would be the Federal High Court.
Okay.
And the Federal High Court, there are different judicial divisions, but that is as a matter of convenience. It's just one Federal High Court we have. So where the action was committed, that is where you can bring the action in any Federal High Court close to you. So
I should even say that like irrespective, besides your your logic in concluding, the act actually puts any argument where it puts it to rest, makes it clear. The act is very clear via section 50 of the act that all matters that are to be brought under the Cyber Crimes Act, and this is very important. Because if you bring a matter under defamation, it's a whole different kind of worm.
That's true.
So but if you're bringing a matter before the court, the Nigerian judiciary, under the Cyber Crime Prevention and Prohibition Act of 2015 as amended, you take it to the Federal High Court. That one is clear.
Okay, this brings me back to you, Barrister Akpe. Are there instances where cyber stalking, cyber bullying have been prosecuted here in Nigeria?
Yes, a lot of them, and we've talked about it right from the beginning of this session.
Instances.
You mentioned that of Very Dark Man.
Okay.
Chief mentioned in Bassi.
Yes, you mentioned that of Nathaniel Bassi.
Yes, I did mention, but that particular case, we do not have facts if the case have been fully prosecuted.
Okay,
so it was taken to court.
Yeah, it was actually taken to court.
Okay. We mentioned the TikTok lady's case against Blessing against Eniola Badmus. I think the court was conclusive in their findings and gave judgment, and it's helped Nigerians at least to know that there's something like cyber stalking. But there's another one that also happened, that 4 bloggers were allegedly were guilty of cyber stalking against the chairman of GTCO. So, and he sued them, and he also got judgment in that regard. So it depends on what, from the conversation we had, we went to what would amount to cyber stalking, and we looked at the section 24. If you go to section 24, there's a particular one you would commit, you get 7 years, less than 7 years. Yeah. There's one you get 10 years. A disease, you get.
There's even the one for 5 years.
For 5 years,
so it varies depending on.
Yeah, the period
of that cyber stalking. Cyber stalking.
Yes.
And most defense, when somebody is being sued for cyber stalking, and like the way Femi Falana, the way what he did in one of those cases. What he did in one of those cases. No, the one they had against the it was, I can't remember the case, but he was
the lawyer. He was the
for the guy that committed, the defendant. What he did was that they pleaded not guilty, and at the end they at a point they asked for allocutus, asking for allocutus for the court to tamper justice with mercy.
You're not guilty.
That is where, if you see that in your last case, you see what the court did.
Yeah, true.
After the court said you go to sentencing for 3 years, or you pay a fine of 150,000 naira. But I can't. They were too lenient.
That was the court lenient.
They were too lenient. What is 150,000?
I think the decision was more or less for the publicity.
Yeah.
I think the decision, the decision was more or less for the publicity of it. It was no more about, it was to set as a deterrent to others, and that's why that case was widely publicized.
Okay.
So the courts sometimes they are a court of policy.
Yes.
So sometimes, as much as you are pursuing the good of the person who brought the case before the courts, in its jurisdiction as a policy maker, as a lawmaking organization. You understand, or a lawmaking arm of government through their interpretative powers, they took it upon themselves sometimes to say, okay, in the interest of justice, let us give these decisions that will act as deterrents, not necessarily to take the person,
probably
the
because
complainant,
probably because
he was before.
I agree with my learned friend over that comment, but probably because the lady in question is a popular actress.
Yeah.
But if it's a kind of somebody that even spent a lot of money to even
go to court,
engage a lawyer, how can you tell me my 150,000? So I
ridiculous.
believe the essence of that decision was because of her personality and all of that in the country.
The court would
now this is to those keypad warriors out there. Know that whatever you're dropping online, you can actually get prosecuted for it. For those keypad warriors, mind what you're typing online, because you might not be lucky. The court might not be so gracious to give you that kind of a penalty, because what the law actually provides for, it is stiffer than what sometimes the court may grant. And you
interestingly, even that 150,000 for some of these keypad warriors,
they cannot afford.
They can't afford it. So I mean,
that's good. But it is actually better
not for the current keypad warriors we have now.
Actually avoid.
Meta is paying
the current keypad warriors. They have NGOs and they have about millions of naira there.
Well, it is actually better to avoid such circumstances than to actually, because it will stress you mentally. Having a court case is not something that is enjoyable all the time. So now this brings me back to, if you go through the act, I think there's a part of the session that says pornographic, that talks about pornographic.
Yeah, the first part,
24
1.
Also amounts to cyber stalking online.
Yes.
So, Barrister Toma, what do you have to say about that?
Okay, so yeah, it's part of the definition that I gave earlier. So there's a number of things that were listed. Sending pornographic messages. So I think this will help us buttress one other point that has really been mute throughout this conversation. So cyber stalking doesn't necessarily have to be public. You know, sending, just the example you give, pornographic content to someone else, maybe your nodes, or disturbing someone with nodes with the intention to put the person at unease or to destabilize the person. You know, the person can bring an action before the courts on cyber stalking, and he carries that same penalty of a maximum of 7 million naira 3 years.
This question: does it have to be like a recurrent action, or once that action is done once, it amounts to? Because there can actually be a misconception where people might think, because of the word stalk, they might feel like it is something that has to happen over time, recurrently, before it would eventually lead to what is called cyberbullying or
cyber stalking. Yeah.
So just to draw a different angle from the conversation, you know, he was talking about from the area of cyber stalking, and I wanted to, when he was talking about it can be private, but it is consistent. It's consistent, but it is private. It brings me to defamation. You know, before you say somebody has defamed you, he must have other people must have been seeing you as
third party.
The publication must have been published somewhere,
or defamatory
and the defendant has to prove that it is true.
Yes.
Yeah, but looking at the recent Supreme Court cases, and in light of the different, more like a pragmatic approach that the Supreme Court has taken now in the case of Akinsete and 2 others, and there was a recent case now where they said that now the defendant is not the only person that will prove.
The claimant has
to now prove the
falsity of what
the defendant is also
trying. The burden is now on.
So the burden was 2 parties. So for in the term of cyber stalking, provided it is consistent in any sort of way, it mustn't be public. Privately, if somebody is stalking you, it must not be public. Yes, it must not be public before you say it is cyber stalking.
You know, I should also say that, of course, the courts will have to interpret, and I'm not aware of any case. There probably may be, but I'm not aware of any case where that level of interpretation, where I have seen that level of interpretation. But the courts will also have to interpret, because the courts could come and say that even when, you know, there was a one-off, it was not consistent. Yes, but at such a magnificent extent that you would have reasonably be at an unease. Do you understand?
Sure.
The courts can decide and say that.
And the act never mentioned anything about consistency. The act said once you have an apprehension of fear, once you feel a grievous harm is coming to you, but yes.
Well, you feel even down to when you feel you're about to be kidnapped.
And in as much as we talk about when we talk about cyber stalking, we relate it to the mediums where you can actually cyber stalk someone. That is the information and communication technologies. Let us also add the
social
medias. They've also done us good as youths and Nigerians as lawyers.
Yeah.
So in as much as we are looking at cyber stalking, let's also see the benefit of what these social media platforms has also done for us as.
Of course. I mean, social media is feeding a lot of people, a lot of the young person.
Yeah, this actually also brings to mind the freedom of speech and the right to privacy. Where does it come in play?
Okay, so I think the general saying will usually be that you have the right to freedom of speech. Chapter 4 of the Constitution guarantees that, basically. Well, in the same chapter 4 of the Constitution, there's a section 37, that speaks to the right to privacy. So, the usual saying, the way we say it is that where your right stops, another person's right begin, or inversely, where your right begins, another person's rights, would end. So essentially, as much as the freedom of, speech is a guaranteed right of every citizen, the freedom of privacy, of private communication, in fact, the section was clear on that, section 37 of the same Constitution, also guarantees people's right to privacy, private communications. So by the time you are in breach of that, there's another saying that, freedom of speech deal, but now the freedom after the speech.
Yeah, you cannot.
Figure out.
People will still get freedom of speech, still get freedom after speech.
But
what I'm talking. So I don't want to mention.
I don't know what you're talking, but
you know what I'm saying.
Let's say it's another.
Well, thank you very much, Barrister.
Thank you very much.
Like the saying goes, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Reaction for good action is reward. Reaction for bad action is punishment. Choose your reactions wisely. Till we come your way again next time. Thanks for staying with us and have a beautiful evening. Bye.